Hey guys, what is up? SuperKmanrocks here, and I am back for my Week 3 LEC overview, analysis, and of course, at the end, my power rankings. I hope everybody is excited for this one. We had some good games this week, some not so good games this week. Some were close, some were not, but we're going to be going over all 10 games from Week 3 in the LEC. If you are excited, please let me know that down in the comment section below. Let me know what game was your favorite of the week here for Week 3 in the LEC. I don't want to waste too much time. Let's go ahead and jump right into our first game of day one, and that was Misfits Gaming taking on BDS. A Misfits win, which is super important for this team. We've been talking about how they've kind of just started very, very off-kilter. This team had a very clear winning strategy. In spring, it was to play around mid lane, to let VTO get so online that he could carry the league. Essentially, he was MVP for a reason. He was easily the most valuable player to his team's success. They won a lot of that in spring because of that. He was a little bit rough in Week 1, had a decent bounce back in Week 2, and he has another really good game here at the beginning of Week 3. He is my player of the game here on the Corki. It really feels like when he is given a champion where he can take over, where he's given a champion where if you just plug resources into him, he can win you the game, he is going to win it. And he absolutely did that, especially against a BDS team that just doesn't have a player of VTO's caliber at any position on their team. You know, no offense to any of these guys, but VTO is a different kind of player. I want to point out Neon as well. Neon was pretty good in spring when they got ahead. He can sometimes struggle in laning phase, but his late game team fighting I think has been pretty good, and he was that again in this one on the Kai'Sa. Really doing well in those late game team fights. Not that it was particularly close at that point, but just a good win for Misfits. Really, the big worry with this team has always been their macro play and the consistency of their ability to maintain an early game and to get their carries ahead. I put a lot of that on jungle and Shlatan. I think a lot of people are really excited about Shlatan, and I think he's a good player. I think he needs to show that he can be a little bit more consistent, especially on a wider array of champions. Right now, the Wukong seems like the pick for him. Which is fine. Wukong's really, really strong in the meta. I expect teams to really start banning that out, though. We saw some Bel'Veth bans. By the way, this is the first week that Bel'Veth has been available in the LEC, so shout out to Bel'Veth. We actually get to see it in a couple games here, but if you could pick up something like that, or really any other jungler of any substance that isn't like the Volibear, I think that Shlatan's going to be a lot better off there. And then Mercy had a good game. Sometimes Mercy's good, sometimes Mercy's bad. And this one, Mercy was fine, and Misfits is able to take it. But on the BDS side, they just looked outclassed pretty much at every level here. Nuclear It was not so good in this one. He's going to get my dud of the game. His scoreline doesn't look atrociously bad, really. If you look at the damage graph, though, I think he had like 5k damage before that big Baron fight at the end of the game. Just very, very little impact on the game at all. These charms were not hitting, and if you're not hitting charm on Ahri, your potential to really do anything in the game goes significantly down, but really, I don't think anybody on BDS played particularly well. Syncroft on the Volibear did nothing. Another thing that we're seeing very, very commonly in pretty much every major region right now is the fact that Volibear is kind of a useless pick. I don't think in concept Volibear is a problem, but I think in execution we've seen that he doesn't have the same kind of impact that something like a Wukong can have on the map. And then the Ezreal Karma bot lane had to win early. It didn't. It's got to poke out that Kai'Sa. You know, the Kai'Sa has to get in close to really do anything, but the Nautilus kind of helps with that because you can full engage on the Karma, which we saw multiple times here. The Karma dying quite a bit. Aerodot not having the best of laning phases. Just overall, not a great win here, or not a great game here from BDS, but Misfits had complete control from moment one. Really, really happy to see that. I don't think this is like a huge accomplishment for them to be beating up a team like BDS, but they're going to take this win, and they're going to be happy about it. Moving on to the second game here of day one, we had Team Vitality taking on SK Gaming. A good win here for Vitality, although I'm not entirely convinced that this is just them being a ton better. They get Bel'Veth. This is the first Bel'Veth we get to see in the LEC. Congratulations. We finally get to see this champion on a pro patch. And, can we go back? Is there a way to get her out of here? Because no, this did not look balanced. I know I talked about this in Academy for a bit. It was certainly more balanced in Academy, I think, when players I think had a little bit more of a skill, like less of a skill differential. But when you're talking about like Vitality versus SK, and you have, you know, some of the best, more mechanically talented players in the world, and then, no offense to SK Gaming, but just not on the same mechanical levels as Vitality, like, this wasn't close. Haru's the player of the game, I guess. Like, the game was all about Bel'Veth. I'm not exactly sure Haru played well. You're still gonna have to convince me that Haru did much. This is a champ that power farms until she hits the point where she has 8 million minions to send, and you get Baron buff, and you're a human ZZ Rot portal, and the game's over, because you have infinite push. That's what happened. That's what happened. Bel'Veth looked really unbalanced. This was not a good one for the balanced team, but I don't think Bel'Veth is going to look like that continuously. I really do think this was just one of those games where she was kind of allowed to do whatever she wanted, and so she took over. Haru is the player of the game, but I do want to give a big shout out to Labrov. Labrov is a little bit inconsistent, especially depending on like the champion that he gets, but Alistar is one of those champions where he gets it, he looks really, really good. Those Alistar engages in the mid to late game here were actually really, really solid from Labrov. He's had a little bit of a tricky start to the year, so it's good to see him have a really good game here. I should also note for SK Gaming, Jezu is not medically cleared to compete. I'm not sure what exactly the medical situation is, but he was out this week, so Gadget is going to be filling in. A lot of people may know Gadget formerly from his time on Unicorns of Love in the CIS as, you know, this kind of crazy pick bot laner, and he definitely shows that in this one. Picks probably the pick he is most associated with, which is that Karthus in the bottom lane. Plays that with the Senna. It's a pick I think can work. It didn't work in this one. Not that he played particularly awful. I just don't think that the team comp is very good surrounding a Karthus here. I don't really like Senna Lee Sin as your like AD duo here, quote unquote. I think you're missing out on a lot of actual damage. And not that that particularly mattered, but Alistar was pretty unkillable by late game. They were relatively out of it by that point, and the Bel'Veth was just kind of making the game a lot harder in general, but in general, I think you could talk about that not being the best of picks in this circumstance. And then you know, Lee Sin I think is debatably playable on this patch. We're going to see it from a few other players. It hasn't really looked good in anybody's hands right now. I think the power point on that champion is lower than it has been in the past, but obviously Lee Sin's a pick that I think a lot of people are going to be leaning towards just because they're so comfortable on it. Gilius is going to be my dud of the game for that reason. He just got pretty heavily out-jungled. You need to disrupt Bel'Veth early game in order to like throw her off of her game plan of just being able to take over the map late, and Lee Sin didn't do that. Gilius didn't do that. He's had a rough start to the year. I don't think it's really just been him. I think Gen X, he had some gold, and they actually had a chance to be able to fight, I think, late there, but Gen X is going all in on the Alistar, and he dies before the Alistar does, and so a lot of their damage that is coming out from that Camille is ending up being essentially irrelevant towards the end part of that fight, so, you know, there's certainly some misplays here, I think, from SK, but for me, Gilius, I think, was just the least impactful in this series, but like I said, Vitality played alright. I don't actually think they played, like, great. Like I said, I think this really was just a draft. If I really had to say, like, the player who played the best, I probably would actually lean towards Labrov, but Haru had the biggest impact on the game with that Bel'Veth pick. Everybody else was just kind of along for the ride. So, yeah, Vitality looks all right here. They're beating up the worst team in the league, but you would hope that against SK they would look a little bit more dominant with a draft gap like this, and honestly, they just looked pretty good. So, it's not the most selling win in Vitality's history, but, you know, a win is a win. Moving on to our third game here of day one, we had Rogue taking on Excel, a battle of two teams that I think are really fighting out for some of the top spots in the LEC, and Rogue is able to, I guess, come back and take this. I don't even know if they were ever down in gold, but they were certainly down in pressure. They capitalize on a pretty big Excel mistake, though, one that we've become disgustingly used to from this Excel Esports team, but Rogue, let's talk about them in the win. They looked good. Honestly, they didn't look phenomenal. They looked very, very, very good, though. You could talk all you want about how they weren't really super proactive in the early game, and they waited a little bit too long for their comp to come online, and you really don't want to do that against something like a Kayle and a Zeri that theoretically should be able to outscale you, but you're kind of relying here on the Azir. You're relying on the Gangplank to scale. and it actually worked for them, mostly because Excel threw the game a little bit here, but we'll get to that in a bit. I want to give a big shout out to Comp. He's going to be my player of the game here for Rogue. He was instrumental in that late game team fight in order to win this game for Rogue. They don't win with the support that is, or with an AD carry that is worse mechanically than Comp. He was instrumental in outputting a ridiculous amount of damage. Yes, Odoamne was really important there too, but I think without Comp, they do not win this game. So, big shout out to Comp on a champion that really shouldn't be the one that has to be relied upon to win those late game team fights in the Kalista. You have an Azir, you have a Gangplank, they should be the ones carrying a lot of the load, but Comp did a really good job of sustaining his damage throughout the entire game. Odoamne had a good one as well on the Gangplank. He eventually scaled up, and he played rather well in lane as well. That's a lane matchup you win as Gangplank pretty hard, and then at some point you just stop winning, or at least you would, depending on the build, but we'll get to that. Yeah, Rogue just looked fine here. This game to me is less about how Rogue played really well, because yeah, they did play alright, but it's more about Excel having this game in their hands and then just making an absurd Baron throw. I'm really not exactly sure what the call behind that was. It didn't work, though. It didn't work even a little bit. I think if you had a little bit more scaling on that Kayle in the top lane, you can maybe try to take something like that, but Finn going the tried and true classic AD Kayle build that I've talked about on this channel, I get it, I get why you do it, but especially in a game like this, I don't get it. Like, I don't get it situationally for this, right? Of AD Kayle is really strong at that 2-item power spike at around 15 to 20 minutes. You can really, really do a lot of damage during that time period, but you slowly start to get weaker as the game goes on, and you're going into a matchup that you are losing early. You are relying so much on your mid game here in order to win the game. If you don't outscale immediately in the 18 to 25 minute mark, if you don't take fights and win them and pressure everywhere on the map, you start to lose a lot of pressure here, and that's exactly what happened as we get to this point at about 28 minutes where Gangplank is just as strong as Kayle, when Kayle should be way stronger, pretty much exclusively due to the fact that she doesn't have that same level of ramping damage that she would get by going AP. So I'm not a fan of this build, especially in a game where you aren't the only comp that wants to scale. You need to have that on board with the Kayle. Outside of that, really the biggest thing I have to criticize is the macro. They did a good job in the mid game to maintain a lead, but to throw it all away at that Baron call is just, it's completely unexplainable. One of the worst calls of the year. It loses Excel the game. Mickey's going to be my dud of the game here. His recon engages were not so good, especially towards the end there. You could give it to Finn, but at least Finn was doing something, right? Really the biggest problem with Finn was just you can't justify AD Kayle in this matchup, but for Mickey, I just think he had a bad game overall. Probably the worst of anybody in the game, but still not a great look from Excel. I can't even say that because they were winning most of this game. So a confusing look for Excel, a team that really has shown that they've had really good macro all year long. For them to just suddenly have a complete collapse in terms of mental like this, I think is very confusing, very upsetting to see. Good on Rogue for being able to capitalize on it, but at the end of the day, I think a lot of people are going to be taking away Excel's decisions from this rather than Rogue's ability to win the game. That's going to bring us to our fourth game here of day one in week 3 of the LEC. We had Fnatic taking on Astralis. Battle of, two teams that I think were surprising to see above 500 at this point, at least for Astralis. Big shock to see them be this good. Unfortunately, a little bit of that is going to be gone in this one. Fnatic with a wonderful game, really, really off of just probably the perfect Gragas game from Wonder. This is a champion we've known for years that he is like phenomenal on. The triple flex G2 strategies that we used to get in the past. We know Wonder's really good on Gragas, but every time he gets it, I'm still surprised with just how good he can be sometimes. He's easily going to be player of the game here. I feel like I'm not going to be shocking a lot of people by saying that. He was phenomenal. A big reason why they won here. His laning phase is incredibly oppressive. Yes, into Sion, it's not even that, scary of a matchup. Sion doesn't really have to worry too much about dying. But Wonder made it so he did. Obviously, Chachi really hasn't been the best laner, but he's been good enough. Like, he's been, you know, he's not, like, awful to the point where you can't justify him even playing in the LEC or anything like that. And Wonder dumpstered him this game. It really wasn't even remotely close. He was so far ahead and so much better at every point in the game. Wonder just looked great. Razork playing Volibear, sure, whatever. You know, you get the Aziri, you get the Zeri, you get the Renata. Really, this game was about the Gragas in the top lane. I cannot stress enough how well Fnatic did in this one, or at least Wonder, like Wonder in general. How well Wonder did in this game, where he's really starting to get back to that form we saw at the beginning of spring, and not towards the end, where he really started to taper off. As for Astralis, a rough game here. Like I said, your solo laners really let you down. Pretty much at every level, there was not much that they were really ever going to be able to do. You could give this to Chachi. You could give this to Dior. I'm going to give it to Dior. I thought he was more useless. At least Chachi, like, existed as Scion, and, like, as a tank, you can do something. Dior was just nothing in this game, so he's going to get my dud of the game. He's been not good since coming up to the LEC. He was not good in spring. They made the team better around him, and he really hasn't been a big reason why this team has been winning in summer. So, definitely a little bit concerning there. I think your solo lanes as Astralis are your two weakest points. Not that Xerxes has been phenomenal. Really, this bot lane has been, like, the source of inspiration for Astralis. I thought Kabe played alright this game. It's really, really tough as a non-mobile AD carry to, and this applies to Xerxes as well, to go into Gragas, where you can just get ulted at any time, especially when that you buy some CDR, and that ult is on, like, a 40-second or so cooldown. You're just kind of fodder at that point, which is what Kabe became at the end of this game on the Twitch, but Junghoon couldn't save it, Kabe couldn't save it, the game was too far gone at that point. So, do I think Astralis is still, you know, one of the better lower half teams in the league? Like, I really do. I think Fnatic is probably better than we're giving them credit for. Like I said in last week's video, Fnatic is the team that I just don't know when to quit, because they're just so mechanically talented, and you get games like this out of Wonder, and you have Upset and Hylissang as your bot lane. Like, you eventually are going to have a good team here, but I don't want to take this loss on Astralis too hard, I guess is my point. They still were okay. Like, it wasn't a complete throttling, and, you know, they played one of the better teams in the league. So, you know, shout out to Astralis. Hopefully they can figure out their solo laner problems, because right now it certainly is what's holding them back. As for Fnatic, you know, if Wonder can continue to play like this, they're going to be great. Like I said, you have one of the better bot lanes in the world. Razork and Humanoid they've certainly had their ups and downs, but, you know, if they can get a little bit more consistent, if you can get some consistency out of those players, this is still one of the best teams in Europe, and a team that will very, very likely be competing for a world spot come playoff time. That's going to go ahead and bring us to our final game here of day one for week 3. That was the Mad Lions taking on G2 Esports. Your MSI representatives going down in this one as Mad Lions takes the game in 42 minutes. A very fun one. Mad actually just played this one really well. There's really no other way for me to put this. They looked really superb in this one. A great game from this Mad Lions bot lane that has continued to show growth throughout both spring and now summer. They have continued to show that game after game, they work really, really, really well together. And Unforgiven might have just been an upgrade to Karzi all along. He's going to get my player of the game here. When this Twitch gets online, it is over. It is absolutely over. And that's exactly what happened for Mad Lions this game. The amount of times Twitch was mid lane to kill Caps must have been ludicrous. If I was the mid laner, I would be spam pinging my bot lane like, oh my god, please have any sort of pressure. But they couldn't mount anything in this game. A really solid one from both Unforgiven and Kaiser on the Renata. A really good game from him. He came very close to being my player of the game as well. Big shout out to Armut in the top lane on the Gangplank. A ludicrous amount of damage coming out from him later in the game. Obviously, he's going into this Aatrox pick that Broken Blade is clearly trying to make work. I don't think it's particularly good in the meta right now. And we saw in this one it was, you know, I'm just going to say it, a little bit useless. A pick that I don't think we're going to be seeing a lot of from anybody who's not supremely confident on the Aatrox in general. But Broken Blade was pretty outclassed in this one by Armut. Niski had another really solid game in the mid lane here on Swain. You put him on those more support. I don't want to say Swain's a supportive pick because he can really win you games, but you put him on a pick that doesn't need a ton of resources and he's still going to do really good. And Oyoya just gets his pick of the litter, right? He gets to go anywhere he wants. In this game, the Twitch got so far ahead, it was really easy to go, okay, well, Twitch is our carry. We can really rally around behind him, and then Renata did a really good job of doing that as well. But this Mad Lions team just looks really cohesive. Like I said, one of the better macro teams in the world right now in terms of just how well they are able to play and recognize their win conditions and what they need to do. As for G2, blah, 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 blah. This is not what you wanted to see. Bot lane got outclassed here. There's really no other way to put it. It was a bot lane gap. Unforgiven and Kaiser showed up. Flocket and Targamas did not. They were not nearly as good in this game. Honestly, I think you could reasonably give dud of the game to a few people. I'm going to give it to Targamas on the Zillion. The support gap in this game was pretty huge. Kaiser outplayed him by quite a bit. You know, you have the two rookie AD carries in here for Mad and G2, and Unforgiven definitely outplayed Flakked in this one. It wasn't even particularly close. You could give a bit of the blame elsewhere, but I think a lot of it does lie on the fact that this bot lane just lost so hard for G2 that, you know, someone like Caps in the mid lane was just constantly under pressure, and even when he was creating advantages for his team, he would very likely be punished for doing so. And then Broken Blade in the top lane, like I said, just had a nothing of a game here on the Aatrox. Part of that's the pick, part of that's the play. Sometimes Broken Blade just has these games, I've talked about this on the channel many, many times, where it's like, no. He is inconsistent, but he's worked on it, he's getting better at it for sure. This is really the first game of summer where he's been, like, bad. I don't imagine it will be the last, but it's certainly, you know, something to keep in mind that he'll have these games where he picks a really weird pick and he just does nothing on it, or he has a standard matchup and he loses a little bit early and just kind of snowballs out of control trying to regain that lead. But in this one, he was all right. Like he just did nothing. He wasn't particularly awful. He just did nothing. Really, this was the bot lane that was running it for the most part. But how this team outlook, I think, is going for both of these, like, this is a huge win for Mad. They're going to be so incredibly happy because really, at the end of the day, this really felt like an outskilled performance. Like, they were the better team here today. It wasn't that G2 just kind of played off kilter. It was Mad played really, really well, and they were just better at almost every aspect of the game. And that's really what you want to see. Mad have been, you know, sneakily, very quietly coming up as one of the... is this team actually like a top team for a lot of this year? There's a chance that they are a top 3 team. There really, really is. And if you would have told me that going into summer, I probably would not have bet on that. As for G2, this loss isn't great. It's certainly a little bit worse than their BDS loss, in my opinion, in terms of just how the team looked in general. The bot lane definitely is cause for concern, but at the end of the day, G2 has shown that they get knocked down quite a bit, and they're always able to get back up, and they're able to kind of form back together. You're going to have some confidence in the fact that they've done this in the past, but certainly not the best look here to end day 1 for G2. That means we can now jump into our second day of games here for week 3 in the LEC. That was kicked off with a matchup between Excel and Team BDS. An Excel win that they really needed coming off of the monumental throw that they had in the day before against Rogue. This is a very confidence re-inspiring win here, I think, for Excel. They just look dominant on every facet of the game. This looks like one of the best teams in the world when they are on, and they were certainly on in this one. Pretty much everybody was, but most especially Marcoon in the jungle here on that Wukong, a very, very scary monkey in this game. He's gonna get my player of the game. He was awesome. This monkey does a lot of damage from ahead, doesn't he? I can see why he is one of the top picks globally for every single region, because when this thing gets ahead, it is really, really tough to do anything about it. And, you know, I think everybody else kind of helped with that. I really like this draft from Excel. I think you give yourself a lot of options here. Obviously, you're relying, with the Lucian Nami pick, you're always relying on early game success here, but this team has always played really well in the early game, so I don't mind it as much. You have some counter answers in the late game with Scion's infinite scaling, and then Lissandra to point and click on somebody to give them enough time for Lucian or Wukong to blow them up. So I do like the little bit of countermeasures that you throw in this draft for Excel, but overall, just a really, really good game played from them. Bot lane won super hard with the help of Marcoon. Nuktuk and Finn are just really solid laners. Both of them have been having career splits here so far in summer. And I hope to see that continue for both of them. But They looked good in this one. Honestly, just all of Excel looking good. This was super dominant. It was never close, so everybody on Excel, of course, looking good. And then on the opposite, you could say the exact opposite for BDS, right? Everybody on BDS kind of looking bad in this one. Done of the game could go to a few people. For me, it's going to go to Nuclear in the mid lane. The Talia game was not good. He has this habit of just not being relevant in games where he is outskilled. And those are becoming more and more frequent. Not to say that I've completely given up on Nuclear as a mid laner in the LEC, but he has certainly not shown a lot of good things here on this BDS team in 2022. Certainly has regressed from Schalke last year, and I honestly don't even think he was, like, phenomenal on Schalke. Go back to my player rankings at the beginning of the split, and you can see that I wasn't, like, super sold on Nuclear, and I actually think he's really only gotten worse since then, so not a great look from him. Syncroft had a really bad game. I know people really like Syncroft, and I do as well. I think he's definitely been, like, the lone bright spot for this BDS team for most of the year, but he was not good in this game. He was kind of running it. He got hard jungle gapped by Marcoon, who just was able to impact the whole map and get super far ahead and was able to kill him pretty much repeatedly over and over again. So, not a good game from him. And then Aggressivu in the top lane. This is a Sejuani pick where if you're not, like, scaling evenly, you're going to get outscaled. And Sion outscaled him. You know, Wukong was able to blow up the Sejuani super quickly, taking a ton of damage from Lucian. You know, just never got to the point where Sejuani could actually play the game and therefore offered essentially nothing to the team in general. So, again, not a great look from BDS at all. I think the bot lane was whatever, right? Like, you pick Ezreal, Karma, and Lucian Nami. You're not supposed to win that early, and they didn't. And then, you know, the rest of the team lost so hard that it didn't particularly matter. So, I'm not going to blame this one too much on the bot lane, but yeah, jungle mid, certainly the letdown for BDS in this game. As for the outlooks of both of these teams, Excel's awesome. Excel's really good. I'm going to take the Rogue game as more of an anomaly. Like I said in that one, I still think that game was Excel's to lose, and they did lose it, but it was still in their control, which gives me confidence, and then seeing them blow out BDS like this is just it's a very, very good sign. As for BDS, they're not a good team. They're a bottom 2 team here with SK. You want to take SK, you want to take BDS, I don't really care. Like, they're both really not good at League of Legends right now. BDS was able to beat G2, but SK was able to beat BDS. Whatever you want to do there. I don't have a lot of hope for that roster. Maybe they'll make some changes, but as it's currently constructed, BDS doesn't seem too good. But on the flip side, Excel looks really, really good. If this pace continues on, I would be very surprised if this is not like an actual LEC finals team. Moving on to the second game here of day 2, we had SK Gaming taking on Rogue. A good win here for Rogue. They go 2-0 in the week. It certainly wasn't clean. That one I will not give to them, but they did pick up a win, which does, you know, it has to count for something at the end of the day. So, yeah, I mean, a win for Rogue, they will take it. A lot of it off of the back of their solo laners just being better in this game, which is just how it was. Odoamne was phenomenal on this Zac top. We have not really seen this anywhere in the world. We've seen some Zac, but not really in the top lane. So kind of a crazy pick to pull out here in LEC. I'm pretty sure they revealed in the post-game interview that they'd never even played this in scrims. This is just like a solo queue pick that he was like, sure, why not? And that's nuts to me. I mean, sure, you know, shout out if it's going to be played like this, then go ahead and do whatever you want. And, you know, it's against SK, so you can probably get away with it, but Odoamne is my player of the game. He was phenomenal on this Zac top. I don't want that to take away from how good Larson was on the Corki, though. Another really good game from Larson. He's really been the backbone of this Rogue team, I think, in 2022. I think everybody else has had their ups and downs, for sure, whereas Larson has pretty consistently just been very, very good for this team. I know a lot of people think of him as, like, kind of a tier below the top mid laners in the region, but he has been consistently, he's probably more consistent than whoever you have as your favorite mid laner in the region, right? He's just been very, very, very good for this Rogue team for a very long time. I think at this point, it's fair to say that Larson is underrated in terms of, like, public opinion on how good he actually is and how important he is for this Rogue team. You could certainly make an argument he is the most important player on the team. I will say for Rogue, it wasn't all sunshines and rainbows. Bot lane certainly struggled. The Lucian Nami pick, like I say, if you win early, it looks good. If you lose, it doesn't. And it didn't look good in this one. Lucian did 0 damage late game. Yes, you can attribute some of that to the Shirelia's second, you know, the rapid fire cannon Shirelia's build from Comp, which is just nothing, but he played Lucian a little bit too passively for me. Not a great game from Comp. doing essentially nothing in the late game. This one was really up to Odo and Larson to carry. And luckily for Rogue, they were able to do that, but not the best showing from the bot lane in general. Probably Comp's worst game of the split so far. As for SK, this is not a good team. This might be an even worse drafting team than they are playing. Gilius had another bad game. I feel like that's 4 in a row, right? I've covered 4 SK games so far since coming back to the channel, and in all 4 of them, Gilius has been my dud of the game. He has not had a good summer split. He picks Lee Sin again here. Obviously, I can refer to the hilarious tweet that Gadget put out, like a couple weeks ago, where he's like trolling his team for picking Lee Sin, and then his team picks Lee Sin the 2 games he gets to play on stage. A little bit tragic, but not a good year for Gilius. He continues his slow decline into just, he's the worst player in the LEC right now. Like, I don't think that that's indicative of his talent level. I think he can be better than that, but from what we have seen so far in 2022, I can't say anything other than Gilius is the worst player in the LEC. And it's really sad to say that, but it is what it is. It's not like the rest of the team played a ton better. I will say, shout out to Certus. He has been kind of a pleasant surprise for this SK Gaming team a little bit. He's known as like an Assassin's only kind of player, a LeBlanc one-trick and solo queue, if you will. And he's kind of grown out of that, I think, a bit. He had a really good game here on the Sylas, but, there's only so much you can do on Sylas against a Zac that's going to dive your backline and do more damage than you. So, oops. And then I thought Treats was alright here on the Senna, but Senna Tahm Kench just does really, really well into Lucian Nami in general, in my opinion, and they definitely outplayed them. Like, there's really nothing else to say. Gadget and Treats were better in bot lane than Comp and Trimby in this game in particular. I don't think they're a better bot lane or anything like that, but, the Senna Tahm Kench lane was strong, just not enough to overcome the Lee Sin gap that I think SK created for themselves. As for the outlooks of these teams, SK sucks. I talked about it in the last game with BDS. These are the 2 worst teams in the league. You can really make the argument that one is worse than the other. I don't care. They're both bad. Take your pick. I don't really care. Neither of them are making playoffs or even going to be remotely in the vicinity unless some major changes happen. As for Rogue, this is a very freaking good League of Legends team. There are so many good teams in the LEC right now. There are realistically like 5 teams at the top that you're just like, put them in whatever order, right? Like the top 5 teams are all so good. Figure it out. Figure out trying to, differentiate them. Try to separate them. They're all so good that I have a hard time breaking apart. Like, is G2 really better than Rogue? Is Excel really better than G2? Like, where's Fnatic? Where's Mad Lions? Like, the top of the LEC is going to be so competitive for those 3 world spots that it's going to be really, really exciting to see how things break down. But Rogue have proven to everybody that they at least definitely deserve to be near the top of that conversation. Moving on to the 3rd game here of day 2, we had Team Vitality taking on Astralis. And is that a 2-0 week for Vitality, I smell? It is, as they do take this win against Astralis in a very close game. A game that you could argue neither team deserved to win. And I will make the argument for that throughout the rest of this segment. But Vitality do end up pulling it out off of the back of the one guy who I think has been really freaking good for them all year, or all split long at least, and that's been Perks. Like, I know we throw Perks in there with, like, Vitality struggling and their macro being not so good, but, like, mechanically speaking, lane speaking, like, Perks has been dominant. He leads the league in pretty much every category, like, gold at 15, CSD, damage percentage, like, he is this Vitality team, and he showed why in this game. Another very, very good one here on the Ahri. He's been a big backbone and reason for this Vitality team to continue on being, relatively a competitive playoff caliber team, and a big reason that they're, at the record that they're at. They're above 500, which is insane. They really shouldn't be with how they've been playing, but Perks is a big reason for that. Not everybody on the team has been playing like that, though. Carzzy is going to get my rare dud of the game here on the winning team. He was not good here on the Senna. Senna Tahm Kench is such a good lane, and he lost this pretty hard, and he made some plays that are just so confusing. He's had some plays all year long that are just like question mark ping spam level plays. And I think you could attribute some of that to just him being way too overconfident in his ability to survive things. He was kind of playing like that on Mad Lions as well, but he would often get away with it. He is not getting away with it on Vitality. You know, for whatever reason, it is certainly not the same on this team. Going from Kaiser to Labrov does seem to be a little bit of a downgrade, but yeah, he didn't look good in spring either. His summer's not been good, his spring hasn't been good. He's definitely, to me, like, I know a lot of people point to Labrov and Haru as, like, weak points of this team, and, like, I agree, like, they haven't been playing perfectly, but to me, Carzzy has been the worst performing member of this Vitality team by a pretty substantial margin all year long, so hopefully he can figure that out. Alfari finally had a good game. Shout out to him. Moving on to Astralis. No flame to Alfari, just, you know, on Gnar, great. It's cool, you had a good one. Moving on to Astralis, another bleh game from Astralis that they really should have won, and then they just make this one terrible decision and lose it all, right? This is a game where Junghoon predictably plays really, really genuinely phenomenally on this Rakan. I almost gave him player of the game. Like, he really was that good that their team lost the game and Junghoon was arguably the best player in the game. But, you know, I just felt Perks was a little bit more impactful. But that top dive, whoever made the call to go for that top dive, I mean, you've got some shit to work out. This Astralis team is like the example of so close, but, you know, not enough. Just right on that border of being able to win games like this, but never actually being able to pull it off. This is a winnable game that they're going to regret not being able to win. A lot of people are flaming the Vex pick. I actually think Vex is alright right now. I know Vex's damage is a little bit low, but I actually think Vex's utility in teamfights can be really good if you have damage sources elsewhere. If you want to let Viego and Xayah take over these teamfights, I actually think Vex can be rather helpful for that. Obviously, I think you'd rather have something like a Zeri. You'd rather first rotation something like a Zeri so that Vitality isn't allowed to second rotation ban it like they did in this game. But yeah, I mean, generally speaking, I think Vex is fine, and Dior is obviously super comfortable on that. It's been a pick he's pulled out a lot in 2022. It's clearly his comfort pick, so it's fine. But like I said, Astralis wasn't super bad in this game. They make one awful decision and it loses them the game. And they've done that multiple times this year. So you're just kind of hoping that at some point they're going to realize, like, oh, if we just don't mess this up, like, if we just play normally, we're going to win a lot more games. So I'm kind of relying on Astralis to be a little bit more competent when it comes to their macro calls. Obviously, they're going to have to prove it, but at some point, they've got to be able to figure this out, right? You would hope so. As for the outlooks of these teams, like I said, Astralis, if they can figure it out, are a good team. They're a team that really can go up with a lot of the top teams in terms of actually playing the game. It's just about closing it out that they need to worry about. As for Vitality, this is certainly not the week of the most this is not the most convincing 2-0 week that a team has ever had, but you're going to take a 2-0 week no matter what. You're going to be happy with that. You put yourself in that conversation for, you know, being that sixth team in playoffs. I know you're fighting off a team like Astralis, you're fighting off teams like Misfits, so it's really good to be able to get wins over them. They're going to be really happy about that, and, you know, every win inspires a little bit more confidence back into this team. If they get their confidence back, if they get their mojo back, if you can get Alfari and Perks playing like top dogs, and if Carzzy can rediscover what he had on Mad Lions, maybe get a little bit more synergy with Labrov, this can still be a very, very good team. That's just a lot of ifs, and we're just waiting to see if any of those are going to happen. Jumping into the fourth game here of Day 2 LEC action, we had Misfits Gaming taking on the Mad Lions. A shocking upset win here for Misfits that they are going to be incredibly excited about. They played really well in a bloodbath of a game that, yes, it went Misfits' way, but, and you look at that score and you're like, oh, 29-17, it probably wasn't that close. Mad with a pretty colossal throw here in this one, a game that they certainly should have won. But Misfits is going to be able to take away the victory here. A couple of awful plays here from Mad Lions. They learned a lot from Excel the day before. I guess they were studying the tape, but just studying the wrong side of the tape. Let's talk about Misfits. A really good game here from Mursa. Probably his best game. He actually seems to tend to have these against Mad Lions. I don't know what it is for Mad Lions that Mursa tends to just be better in, but he was awesome. He's my player of the game here on the Renata. Those ultimates in the team fights late game, just generally the plays around the map, I thought were really, really solid. They don't win the game with a worse support. Neon part of it was good, part of it was bad. He played well, I think, late game. Takes that, like, I don't know if you want to call it, like, an ego 1v1 against Unforgiven, like, midway through the game and he just loses, right? Or, like, Unforgiven takes it and loses and he wins that, like, I should say. And just, shout out, like, but, the late game team fights were a little questionable, I think, from Neon, but he's getting better at those. He's getting better. And then VTO. VTO's really good. What else do I have to say? VTO's really good. You give him Ari, he's going to do some good stuff. He's going to carry your team. Shout out. Like, there's really nothing else to say. He's really good. Top side of the map was fine. Relatively irrelevant, but I didn't mean that. That pun was not intentional. That wasn't even on purpose, but shout out. They were fine. As for Mad Lions, they had complete control of this game. They did. They should have won, and they didn't. I don't know who you want to blame here, right? There were a couple plays that are just not good. I think the 3 members that you can look to be like, what are you doing? You've got Armut in the top lane, who is going to get my dud of the game here on the Gangplank. Those late game team fights were bad. Like, just completely whiffing barrel chains. The ultimate in that last one, like, what are you doing? Of course, you have the Baron throw. It's not his fault, but just something to bring up. Not a good game from Armut. He has, honestly, like, I don't know if I'm, like, breaking news to people here. He's not been good this year. They've won a lot in spite of him, and I think that is definitely something to be concerned about, because he has regressed, I think, a lot from what we saw out of Armut in 2021, where he could actually be a power side of the map for this Mad Lions team. So far this year, he has just been someone that you hope doesn't cost you games. In this one, he certainly was not advantageous for Mad. And then I think the bot lane are the other 2 members that you can definitely question. Unforgiven didn't have a particularly good one. Like I said, the ego 1v1 against Neon, where he's like 2 levels up, and he just loses on Callista. And then Kaiser with some weird engages on this Nautilus. One towards the end of the game that just kind of loses them the game, because they certainly were not in a position to fight at that point. But, at least you're trying. At least you're trying to make plays. Niski continues to be, like, the part of this team where if they continue to rally around him, I can see some success. But also, he wasn't perfect in this game either. Certainly his worst game of the split, in my opinion, for someone who's been having an MVP caliber start to the year. Not the best showing here against Misfits, but you are going up against the former MVP here in VTO from last split. But yeah, overall, Mad should have won this game. They throw at Baron, and they don't. They come away with a loss. I usually try to take these games as a benefit towards the team that was supposed to win, because they had it in their grasp, and if they can shore up some of the weaknesses, then, this is a win for them. But, I gotta see that. I gotta see that on the, in the Rift, on the game, because it's easy to talk about it, and it's not easy to execute on it. So, hopefully we can definitely see that from Mad. It's a team that I definitely expect to get their macro in order. Niski has been really good with that, and Kaiser has always been a pretty phenomenal shot caller, so it's really easy to see why this team was having such big macro advantages earlier in the year. It's just about getting back to that and not making these silly decisions that throw games. But Misfits is going to be really excited about this. Their bot lane playing really well. Mursa and VTO kind of being the 2 big carries here, I think is a good sign. Usually when Mursa is playing well, this team wins, because VTO is mostly consistent. He wasn't at the beginning of summer, but he's kind of getting back to that form we knew him for. And then Neon is a good team fighter. He gets there eventually. The top side just needs to be fine. Irrelevant and Schlatan are fine, and they just need to not be bad enough to lose them games. Currently, they are doing that. They're being successful in that regard. It's just about keeping that up. But a good game from Mursa and a good game from VTO, that usually spells Misfit success. All right, that's going to let us jump into our final game here of Week 3 LEC action. We had a clash between the 2 top organizations in Europe. Of course, we had G2 Esports taking on Fnatic. And Fnatic is actually able to pick up a really big win here. And a really solid game from Fnatic. They were the better team by far in this one. It really wasn't all that close. And this is the Fnatic that I think a lot of us have been waiting on. This is the Fnatic where all of their members genuinely feel unlocked. They all feel like important components. And they all feel like they have good synergy together. Most especially that top side of the map, which we will get to. My player of the game here it has to go to Razork, who this is easily his best game in a Fnatic uniform. He was really phenomenal in this one. Was just way better than G2 at pretty much everything. We've always known him much better as a carry-oriented player, and he doesn't get that opportunity to do that too much on Fnatic, but they certainly gave him the keys in this one, and he did super-duper well with this one. He's very deserving of the player of the game. He's not the only one on Fnatic who played super well, though. You want to give a shout out to Wunder here on the Ornn. Him and Razork seem to have a very, very good 2v2 synergy, and just a synergy between the two in terms of controlling the top side of the map. This is something to be very, very excited about for Fnatic fans. Wunder seems to be getting back on track to that 2021-2020 Wunder. And this was this is a game from Razork that we really haven't seen since his rookie year in 2020 with Misfits. Like, he was the carry, and they gave him the keys, and Wunder was a great support, and Hylissang had a phenomenal game here, kind of showing Targamas how it's done on that Zilean pick that Targamas was pretty bad on earlier in the week, so really, really funny to see that. And Humanoid and Upset did really well. Humanoid didn't die to a gank pre-6. He got ganked pre-6, and he didn't die, which is, you know, I mean, this is about as good of a showing from Fnatic as you could possibly get. Really just everything going right on every front for this team. As for G2, they just got outclassed. There's really no other way to put it. They were the worst team in this matchup. Yankos is my dud of the game. He got completely outjungled by Razork. It wasn't even particularly close. For moment one, the Viego had complete control of this map, and they were able to do pretty much whatever they wanted to. Really, really good game from them. This bot lane continues to be troubling, I think, for G2, something that you definitely hope can improve in the future. They showed a lot of really good signs in spring, but we have to remember this is still a rookie bot lane for G2, and in these big games, you can definitely see that. They get targeted and they get exposed a little bit here. Flakked with really no impact, and then Targamas just kind of there, right? Not to say that Broken Blade played much better. Like I said, the top side of the map was a big focus for Razork this game. Gangplank has really not been a pick for a lot of European top laners. We've certainly seen some bad Gangplank games this week. I'm not sure if that's indicative of the region as a whole, but this week in particular, there were quite a few Gangplank performances where it's just like, well, I don't know, if you can't play the champion, don't play the champion, you know what I mean? Broken Blade definitely felt like that in this one, where it was missing barrel combos, or just overestimating the amount of damage he can take in a fight, like that kind of stuff. Not knowing your limits on that champion can be a huge problem. And Broken Blade definitely showed that he's not quite as comfortable on that pick as he has been in the past. He had a rough week as well, but G2 just not clicking, really at all, in any form. As for the outlooks of these two teams, I don't really know, man. G2 had a really rough week. Obviously, the loss earlier in the week to Mad Lions is like, okay, well, you know, sometimes G2 loses, but this one was just like, they got completely outclassed. This one was never close. They never even really looked like they were in the same vicinity as Fnatic, which is a worrying sign. This is a team that has now kind of struggled 2 weeks in a row, at least. You know, losing to BDS was weird, right? But it happens. And then an 0-2 week here against Mad and Fnatic, definitely not confidence-inspiring for G2. As for Fnatic, a phenomenal week for them. This is exactly what you wanted to see. Yeah, they had a game against Astralis where it was a little bit close, and Astralis definitely had it in their hands at the beginning, but at the end of the day, they still came back and won that game, and then, you know, to completely outclass the former champions, the reigning champions here, the MSI representatives in G2, is a really, really good sign. Hopefully that means this team is finally starting to reach that potential that we all know that they are capable of with this roster. If they can hit that, then they're going to be, you know, LEC champion contenders, absolutely for sure. All right, that is going to do it for my Week 3 LEC overview and analysis of all 10 games from both days. Up on the screen right now, you are going to see my updated version of the standings page for LEC, where you see the standings, the win-loss records, and the streak for every single team. Any ties will just be broken in alphabetical order. And then in one of the columns to the right, you will see my power ranking number for those teams, so you can see where exactly I power rank them from 1 to 10, as well as how that has changed from last week to this week. So let's go ahead and go over the biggest risers, the biggest fallers. I know that this power ranking list is going to be a little bit controversial, and there are some things that I was very close to doing, but this is the one I settled on. Fnatic's jumping up 2 to number 1. Yeah, I know, I'm the biggest Fnatic fan of this team, at least in the world, it seems, but this team finally showed that potential that I think I have been waiting on all year long. If they can just maintain this. This was the best game. This was the best week that they have had as a team. If they can maintain this, they're the best team in Europe. I believe that. I firmly do. If they can just keep whatever this momentum is, they are the best team in Europe. Biggest faller this week is going to be G2, falling from number 1 to number 3. Although, you could sure make the case to me that they should be number 4. Because, you know, Rogue certainly looks better right now. I think you could definitely make a case that Rogue looks like the better team right now. My problem is I'm not sure if I believe long-term that Rogue will be better than G2. I think that they are very close, and I maybe just need one more week, but right now, G2 stays in the top 3, very, very close. Rogue and Mad Lions very narrowly missing out on that top 3 slot, but only other risers and fallers, Misfits Gaming jumping Astralis, going 8-7, them switching around. Misfits just seems a little bit more confident. They have the best player out of the two, although, I don't know, Junghoon's pretty good, but VTO is the best player out of those two teams. Both of them look pretty good. I just need to see a little bit more consistency out of Astralis. If they didn't blow both games this week, if they came out of this 2-0, who knows? They may have leapfrogged into the top 5. You never know. Astralis still looks like a team that can compete, but Misfits is definitely winning more right now. My player of the week is going to go to Odoamne on Rogue. He was really phenomenal. I think you could very reasonably give this to Wonder on Fnatic as well, but for me, Odoamne was just truly, truly great this week. Those two top laners, I think, really separated themselves from the pack. A week that was very weak, you know, I have no other word for it, very not strong in terms of top lane performances. Those two definitely stood out above the rest, but Odoamne is going to get my nod for my week 3 player of the week. My dud of the week in week 3, you could give it to Gilius, but I feel like, you know, I gave it to him in week 2. Give him a little bit of a break. I'm going to give it to Nuclear Ant on BDS, who has continued to show signs of decay from his time on Schalke, and, you know, comes over to BDS, and he was certainly the worst performing member of that team this week, and you could definitely make a case that they were the worst team in the LEC this week. So, my dud of the week is going to go to Nuclear Ant. My player of the week is going to go to Odoamne, but that is going to do it for my week 3 video on the LEC. If you guys enjoyed, please go ahead and leave a like, and let me know what you guys' favorite game was down in the comment section below. Let me know your player of the week, your dud of the week, how you feel about all these teams. You know I love interacting with you guys down in the comment section, but other than that, I hope you all are having a great day. I hope you continue to have a great day, and I will see you all later.